Hey guys, Stealth here and welcome back to Steel Division 2. What I have for you today is a replay of me using the Second Blindée, which is one of the older battle groups from Steel Division 1. It's a French armored battle group and it is armed at, or aimed rather, at rushing. Or at least that's the way that I have it set up. It's a deck that can have a couple of very fast units. Its staying power I think is limited. So let me quickly walk you through the deck and the design thinking behind it. Now, to be fair, the replay that I'm about to show you is the one that I only did against AI. And that means that I will not be able to evaluate its progress or its effectiveness against human players just yet, as I haven't gotten that far yet. But I definitely had a lot of fun playing it against AI. Now, a couple of fast units in this deck. And as you can see, the name is Rush Job, which means that all of the units in here are supposed to be fast. Aside from that, all the units are either going to be coming in phase A or B, or not at all. So there is no phase C unit in this deck. Either I win in phase A or B, or I die before I even make it to phase C. That's basically the thinking behind this deck. And to even stack that further, I have the deployment type of Vanguard, which means I get most points in phase A, slightly less points in phase B, and the least points in phase C. So in phase A, I can throw a lot of stuff at the enemy. Now, recon units, a fast 50 cal Jeep, a M8 or AM-M8 Spahi, which is another fast vehicle, 90 kph road speed, decent gun on it with AP and HE rounds, so I can engage infantry or vehicles, whichever I come across. A couple of M3A3 Spahi, which again is a fast unit. This one's slightly less so because it only does 60. But it carries 100 AP rounds and 74 HE rounds. It's only a 37mm, so if you want to kill something with this, you're going to have to get close. And then for phase B, a couple of Spahi in just a M2 half-track. I usually use these as a passive scout, or in case I want to scout out a hilltop. Infantry, again, fast vehicles, at least that's the thinking behind it. So I have the, what do they call it, the Voltigeur in the GMC. 70 kph road speed, 45 kph off-road. Not exactly good in stealth values, but these guys are only supposed to bring the infantry to the objective and offload them there. I have those in phase A, 2 of them, so 18 Voltigeur total. Then a couple of command sapper, so I can quickly get rid of enemy infantry. These are even faster in the 4 GPA, which has 105 km road speed. Voltigeur mitrailleur, which means these guys come with a light machine gun or 2. Again, a pretty fast transport, the M2 half-track, unfortunately not armed with a machine gun. Similarly, the GMCs are not armed with a machine gun, so any support vehicles or any support that these infantry have, not from their vehicles anyway. And finally, in phase A, the sapeur. In the M2 or the H2 M5A1, that is a half-track with a medium/heavy machine gun on it. So these guys do in fact get support from their vehicle. Tanks then, cheap and fast. That was the thinking behind this deck, cheap and fast. So you got the AM-M8. This is basically the armored version of the one that I just showed you in the recon tab. We got the command M1 or M3A3. A lot of these M3 stewards. We got a couple of M5A1. Actually, I'm not really sure if the M3A3 is the Stewart, but whatever. Char M5A1. Char is, I believe, the French word for tank. So basically, tank M5A1. I got a couple of those. I also got the M4A2 coming in phase B, and the M4A3 with a 76mm coming in phase B as well. And as you can see, all of these have medium veterancy. Then, from support, I want to be able to get to a position fast, and I might need to eradicate infantry when I get there. So that's what I have the flamethrower infantry here for. I also got the Obusier M8, which is an M8 as I have shown you previously, but it's a slightly different weapon. This thing comes with the M1A1 pack, which only fires HE rounds, and these things do a little bit more damage against infantry. Not particularly accurate at 24% accuracy. We get a commandant to make sure that all the leaders get an additional veterancy boost, and finally a resupply truck. Although if I need these, then something has gone wrong with one of my tanks. And to be honest, I don't really expect them to live long enough to even need a supply truck. Anti-tank, again, fast is good. So we got a couple of fusiliers marins with a bazooka. Again, quickly rushing over to a position in their fort, and then taking up position and making sure that enemy armor does not have a chance to get through. I got a couple of those, some in the fort, and I believe that at that point I ran out of the forts. As you can see, no 4 GPA left. So that's when I switched them to the WC-52, which also can support the infantry with a medium/heavy machine gun. A couple of tank destroyers, M10A1s. Again, fast is good, although these are not as fast as the rest of the group. So these will be falling behind a little bit more, but that's fine, because they don't have the armor to match. And with that in mind, having them in a second line is actually a good thing. And then in phase B, a couple more of my fusiliers marins. And here, not too much going on, because I don't really think that I'm going to be needing these too much. Couple of flak vans, we got the Bofors, and finally the more stationary version of the Bofors. Again, phases A and B. RT, mobile mortars. I gotta keep these guys fast and loose and make sure they can keep up with the offensive and keep up with the push. So we got 8 of those. I know that I have a couple of other options, and you could argue that the Piper L4 as a reconnaissance aircraft or / artillery observer could also be very handy. But that would require me to micromanage this thing, and I don't really know if I'm going to be capable of doing that in the middle of the battle. But so far these things have worked. And then air power. Again, everything is available to me in phase A. This means that I have a lot of firepower in this phase. What you can see here is the DB-7B. This is a bit of an odd duck in the sense that it's a bomber that does not actually deploy itchy bombs, but smoke bombs. So you can pretty quickly set a smoke screen in case you need that. And this works both in an offensive and defensive way. So I can both smoke up my own forces in case they need defense, or smoke up an enemy tank so that it loses line of sight on my units, and that allows my units to get closer. Spitfire LF Mark 9. Basically your standard fighter. And then we got the P-38J with rocket pods. Another P-38J with bombs. This is a fighter bomber, and another one of those. So anything that I come across in phase A that isn't getting killed off by my tanks, isn't getting hit by my infantry, or isn't getting killed off by my bazookas, can then quickly get either suppressed or killed off by my aircraft. Would I recommend this against players? Probably not, because I don't think that they're going to be very effective. Anyway, on to the replay. Alright, here we are. This is Lake Narach, and we're playing against 3 medium AIs. I wanted to test out this deck. I wasn't quite confident enough about going up against enemy players, especially with an experimental deck like this. And yes, you could argue, well, if you're going up against AI, then you never know if it's going to be effective against players. True, I wouldn't know that. We'll just have to test it. Anyway, my plan over here is to start from the left and to start from the middle / left. Sparky's going over here, he's going to take over this town, and Rip's going to hold the right flank. My plan is to initially make it over here, but then I thought, hold on, I might not be able to do that because I only got light tanks. And the light tanks need to be in short range encounters if they want to be actually having any sort of a chance at killing off the German armor that I'm going to be encountering. So, change of plans. Set up a more defensive position here, or at least send a smaller detachment here, and push with a larger group down the middle. Hoping that I'm not going to be encountering too heavy enemy infantry, and that I'm not going to be looking at any airstrikes, because I won't really be able to afford any sort of plane. Now, Sparky is going to actually come in with a more infantry-minded group to take over this town and hold it, and my forces are just going to push right through. So this is going to be charge of the Light Brigade, and for that I have 8 Char M5A1s, 70mm penetration, 4 damage, a whole bunch of shells, but I doubt that they'll go through half of those, 60 kph speed, 34 off-road speed, and a couple of Voltigeur to help them. Finally, an AM-8 Spahi to make sure that these things can actually see what they're shooting at. That is what I'm going to be pushing through here. Left flank, similar setup, but far less effective. We got a Command M3A3, so this is a leader tank that's supposed to boost the effectiveness of all the surrounding tanks. Another M8 Spahi. And somewhere in the back over here, I'm also going to have a... yep, there it is, the Command M3A3. And I will also be deploying a commander, which means that the leaders get an additional veterancy level that they distribute among their own troops. Sparky is actually going in with a well-oriented group, and he's also deploying some units here on the right. You might also find this replay on his channel, by the way. I'll link to that down below in the description. And Rip over here on the right flank is going in with Sapri, Dozor, an SG-43 machine gunner, and some Komroti. And he's going to try and, I think, take over this town. But I wasn't... Here's the replay bug again. Oh, never mind. I wasn't really paying too much attention to his side. So we're off, and you can immediately see that the M8 over here is far faster than the surrounding transport, than the escorting tanks, or the tanks that it's supposed to be escorting. I have a D7B overhead. A second D7B is already on mission, but is being forced to fall back. And these I just didn't deploy initially correctly, because I thought I could attack ground. And that's not the way that this works. The way that this works is that you press B to deploy smokescreen, but I hadn't figured that out at that point. The rest of my forces is in contact. Sparky has also taken up position with a couple of Daimler AC scout cars, and this is when my AM-M8 is falling back a little bit to make sure that I don't immediately get hit by the Panzer Grenadier and the Pioneer over there. Offloading the Voltigeur quickly, trying to get cover inside of a building here because I'm already taking artillery fire. And that is when the rest of the Light Brigade just charges through. All these Char M5A1s, again, not particularly survivable, but together they put up quite a fight. Just driving through town, trying not to run over my own Voltigeur over here, although that's not really a thing anyway. M8 Spahi is already getting killed off because there is a Panzer IV-J over here. That's a bit of a problem. The Panzer IV-J, as you can see also here and on the unit card, has 135mm of penetration and 75mm of frontal armor. My tanks have 70mm of penetration and exactly 55mm of frontal armor. So this thing is going to pretty much one-shot these tanks. And these tanks at maximum range don't really have a chance. So I need to get closer. And that's why I just keep moving. Because it is only one Panzer IV. And there's a whole lot of me. There's the shooter killed. There's the shooter knocked out. I guess that... And this is a little weird. You can get knocked out and killed at the same time. Steel Division logic in progress. And they're just charging through, forcing the Panzer IV to fall back. And that's when I light up another Panzer IV-J. Still, undeterred, little tanks charge forward. And they're actually forcing this one to fall back. This one already has its turret stuck. Is taking a lot of fire from these little tanks, which currently are operating on a range of about 160 meters, maybe 200. Something like that, but definitely not more. Killing off one Panzer IV-J. The other one is still falling back. I might be able to get that one before he falls back completely. And in the meanwhile, the Voltigeur are pushing up here on the hill, trying to take this hill and getting another capture point. There's the Panzer IV-J. And I really want to get that thing killed. There we go, because that again forces the front line back. And I might be able to capture this flag. Unfortunately, while I was making this mad dash into enemy territory, my left flank completely fell to the enemy. You can still see a couple of my units over here, smoldering wrecks. Nothing left of these tanks. And the AI was not really taking any prisoners and immediately pushing their front line far, far into our left flank. Capturing this hilltop over here, or at least they have their front line surrounded so far, or extended so far, that the flag actually switches to them. So it's time to start bringing in some units over here. But I was having far too much fun making my dash into enemy territory. Unfortunately, these guys don't have a recon. So I basically have to stumble onto an enemy unit before I'm going to be able to shoot it. Now, enemy armor does not exactly have good stealth values either, so those should be easy to find. And in the meanwhile, I might be able to intercept some reinforcements as they're still coming down this road, that road, and the road over here, provided that I can get by this hill. Couple more pioneers get spotted, and of course they don't really stand a chance as they're trying to get into this hill cover. Don't quite make it there. And the next part that I want to kill off is the MG42. So I stun it with the P38J, force it to be pinned down, and hopefully allowing my tanks to get up there and kill them off. But I just didn't really have enough infantry over here to push these guys back. Back to the left, where I'm engaging a Panzer IIIH and a Stug. Unfortunately, I don't quite have eyes on it, and my units die far too fast, far too soon, for me to actually be able to do much with my aircraft. So it's time to buy myself a little bit more time. And that's when the DB-7B comes in and drops smoke on the enemy tanks, or actually slightly in front of it. And with that, I'm going to switch it to neutral. With that, I cut off line of sight for the Pioneers, the Panzer III, and hopefully this Stug. But he seems to be slightly on the... well, maybe he's going to get cut off. No, he managed to make it through the smoke screen. So unfortunately, he was actually too fast for me. And I should have put the smoke screen a little bit further forward, allowing my units a little bit more time to come in. Maybe ask my allies for some help. And overall, just buy a little bit more time on this flank. I want to get this attack beacon, or I want to get this machine gun killed so I can take this flag as well. And at that point, RIP also has quite a good advancement on the right flank. So we are currently sitting on 13 flags. The enemy also has 13, but that is not going to last long. As we will immediately get, there we go, back to 14, 15. If this machine gun dies, we're going to have 16. And that's when the AI sits on a minor defeat in 30 minutes. I'm trying to maneuver my tanks around here, but this was a bad play by me. I shouldn't have actually sent these tanks over here because I was losing too much time. Time that could have been better spent trying to get to here. Here or just around the corner, from where I would have a pretty close quarter shot at anything that comes down this road. Such as these logistics trucks, this 20mm gun, and this autocannon. No, not autocannon. This is the 75mm gun, which is quite dangerous against my armor, but fortunately they don't really get a shot off. Now the machine gun is so far surrounded that the flag is ours, so now we have 16. And the tanks are finally getting into a position where they can actually do some damage. Sparky's infantry is also pushing up, and with that, the infantry over there should be going away. Now back to the left flank, where, again, I really don't have very much. I do have the Voltigeur, which are currently being engaged by Stug 3. These guys, unfortunately for me, don't really come with any sort of weapon that's actually able to deal with a Stug. But aircraft can buy me a little bit of time. And interestingly, this guy did so much damage to the Stug that it decided to surrender to the incoming Voltigeur. Yeah. Who says that you'd need an anti-tank weapon to kill these things off? Just send infantry forward, hit them with a plane, and they'll... well, they might surrender. Over here, I'm in contact with another Stug. These guys are still going after these Voltigeur. Voltigeur over here are just sitting. Not really capable of doing anything. So again, I'm just trying to buy myself a little bit more time, smoking up this position, and again hoping that there is no enemy armor coming down this road for the next couple minutes. I have a couple of bazookas coming in, and this is when it's handy that these things are so fast. But I made the mistake of rushing these things in across the road. That is going to cost me at least one of these units, and makes it so that they're going to get killed off by the units on this hill. So what I should have done is just rush them over this hill, down the next, and up the next one. And again, my planes are proving to be very effective over here. And just keep suppressing these tanks, keep forcing them to fall back, while I'm buying a little bit of time to get my bazookas up here. And this is also when that combination of the bazooka infantry and the WC-52 comes in handy. Because while the bazooka is making its way up the hill, the machine gun is capable of suppressing the Pioneer over here. Or at least, that's the plan. A couple more AMX M8 coming up. Hopefully going to get close enough to either get these things suppressed or killed off. While the bazookas are also rushing into position. And you can see that one of the bazookas got killed off. I offload the other one quickly, and this is when, unfortunately for me, and especially for the Voltigeur, The Stug and the Panzer III start pushing forward. And while this thing seems to be very interested in taking out the Jeep, the bazooka survived. And that's going to be a shitty position for the Stug to be in. Stug fires, and the bazooka fires back. Stug gets its gun jammed, so it's completely out of the fight at this point. Bazookas fire again, no more Stug. Unfortunately, all my Voltigeurs surrendered. Or at least got hit so badly that they were forced to surrender. And the AMX M8s, or not AMX, the AM M8s don't really have too much of a shot at the moment, other than the Pioneer. So it's time to bring in some more bazookas. This time again with the WC-52 in case there's enemy infantry here as well. And once again I am making a dash into enemy territory because with these things, if they are unopposed, you can really get enemy territory quickly. They're so fast. They have a decently punchy gun on them, and with that you can quickly grab flags, possibly turning the battle. Now let's pause it for a second. Most of the armor that I had over here has died. I have exactly one tank left. A couple of Voltigeurs over here on this hill, but at least we have the hill. And ideally I want to get to this village as well. Sparky and Rip were doing a lot of good work here on the right flank, and you can see that they almost have the enemy surrounded over here. This is Rip's T-34-76s, and I believe that he was pushing here with Sparky to try and get this town under our control as well. They have the town, but it's shaky. And if we can even get here, we can get another flag, and we can put it up to 18. So they definitely were able to take the pressure off of my armor. And the way that I consider this is, again, you shouldn't compare the game too much to Wargame. But you could consider it to be an airborne group. In Wargame Red Dragon, airborne groups are capable of capturing terrain quickly, but they're not really that good at holding it. And that's exactly what you see happening with my second Blindée. Because while they're good at pushing up, their staying power is very limited. And unfortunately, I do need allies in order to keep going. P-38J comes in, and there is, at this point, quite a bit of anti-air firing back at it. One over here and another one back there. So, sending an aircraft, not ideal, and yet I try it. I do get the AA gun, but I also lose the aircraft. Not a good trade for me, because they can always get more AA guns, but I cannot get that many more of those aircraft. Another group of Pioneer have been spotted. Time for the bazookas and especially their jeeps to start making their presence known, and the Voltigeurs to start capturing this hill. In the meanwhile, I'm bypassing the hill with the rest of the forces. The hill at the moment is not that interesting, although of course yes, it is a capture point. But aside from these Voltigeurs, I don't really have too much that can be pushing up to it. One of the WC-52 jeeps though can, and this is a very risky maneuver that I never should have undertaken. Because I'm sending this jeep almost directly towards the Pioneer, and this thing has 0 armor on it. So you're basically sending an unarmed jeep against an infantry group, and the infantry group was having none of my shit and just immediately wiped it out. I do have the flag, thanks to the Voltigeurs, but once again, they have taken this hill. It's constantly switching back and forth. At this point, we're looking at 18 flags versus the enemy's 8. A couple more infantryans coming in, a couple of T-34-85s from Rip coming in, and especially with all those numbers we should be able to make a dash into enemy territory even more. Now, there is still something over here, but it's shaky, and you can see that it's quickly dissipating, so the enemy is giving up terrain. With that, I don't really need to pay attention to my stern anymore, my backlines, so I can push up with nothing more than a couple of AM M8s, as well as a couple of bazookas, which I deploy in here, making sure that enemy units which do get close are going to get wiped out by the bazookas. They don't have a lot of charges, but they don't really need to, because they're just here as a roadblock. AM M8s pushing forward, and we encounter a bit of a problem over here. The AI starts to clump more tanks together over here. Panzer IV Leader, Tiger E, Panzer IV-H, Panzer IV Leader. And there is another vehicle coming down the road. So this is not something that I want to be engaging. Unfortunately, the AM-8 over here got killed off by those tanks. The other one's able to make it out alive, captures the town all by himself, and can now actually, literally, go to town on anything that he can find. He will need some reinforcements though, because as it stands, this unit just does not have the staying power either. We do, however, have 21 flags versus their 5. And this is still, I'd say, a result of my dash over here. But also definitely Rip pushing in from the right, capturing this town over here. Having a little pocket of resistance over here, which is surrounded. Generally not very good for tank morale. And my forces, which are, well, sort of flipping this flag back and forth. And unfortunately the Voltigeur over here did not quite make it to the town. But I did capture another supply truck. So whether it's Red Dragon or not, supply truck capturing is still a thing. Now, these Tigers, Panzers, all these tanks are going to be a problem. So once again, my smoke plane came in, or smoke planes came in, smoked up here, smoked up there, and just neutralized line of sight. Of course, they didn't last long, as I should have put the smoke screen over there. So again, I'm still trying to manage those things and learning where they're going to be most effective. The enemy is pushing back. We now have 19 flags. The enemy has 7. Still, it's a minor defeat for them in 7 minutes. So we basically need to hold what we have. And we don't need to be too much more aggressive than what we currently have. But of course we are going to be. We want to get more terrain. We want to win harder, despite the fact that you don't need to. Now, much to my surprise, this guy survived this far. And he just continues to... look at that. He continues to survive. Unfortunately, he does take a bit of spalling damage over there. And there, finally he gets killed off. That guy made quite a dash. He started out over here, did a bit of damage over there, moved further north, did a bit of damage over here. Escaped a couple of enemy armored units over there on that flank. And finally took refuge into that town, which he single-handedly captured. And that's when he finally got killed off, I think, by an AA gun over there. Now, still sending in my aircraft, still trying to keep the tanks suppressed using rocket pods. Those things sometimes do kill, but it is not a guarantee. So I'm bringing in some more armor. I have my M4A3s over here, and combine that with Rip's T-3485s, which he does have a lot of. We should have enough firepower to drive these things back, if only temporarily. And with that, also recapture the town. And get another flag back. So now we're sitting again at 19 flags. You can see a lot of firepower coming off of these tanks. And I gotta say, the game does look good. The way that the game renders these things, renders the grass, the firing tanks, I really, really like it. It's really well done. So in fact, let me just temporarily pause here and admire the view. Because there is a lot of attention to detail on these units. You can see almost the entire face of the guy who's operating the gun. You can even see that he has text on his... I'm not quite sure if that's a beret on his head, but something quite like it. Alright, let's kick it off and continue with pushing into enemy territory. Once again, an M8 rushes forward. These things on roads have a speed of 90 kph. So if you see one of these, try to take it out quickly, because they will be coming for you and they will be getting a lot of terrain, especially if it's undefended. Look at that. This guy just rushed down the road and made a ginormous gash into enemy territory. I was hoping to make it all the way here, cutting off this enemy spawn point, but I ran into a little bit too much resistance for one M8 to handle, so I cannot quite get there. In the meanwhile, the M4A3s are pushing back on Pioneers. Pioneers do have grenades, and you can see that they're doing a hell of a number on the M4A3 over here. Mostly HE damage, so it's not too lethal. And with those guys going away, you can see at the front line, it means it pushes it back all the way back to the lake. And we basically have this whole flank secured. I'm also moving some more infantry up here. I also have a bazooka infantry in case those Tigers get even closer. And the initial push that I had over here is completely gone. Fortunately, Sparky's taken up the slack. He has his Churchill 6 over here, a couple of Churchill 7s. These things have a lot of armor. 150 frontal millimeter, or millimeter frontal armor, 90 millimeter punch on the gun. If you're looking at something like this, that only has 75 millimeter armor and 135 millimeter penetration, it means that these Churchills are just almost completely invulnerable to getting hit, or to getting killed off. That is at max range. At these ranges, they might in fact take quite a bit of damage. So the Churchill pushes forward, and again, it just looks really, really good. You can even see that the grass is all getting pushed aside by the tracks of this Churchill over here. Churchill fires, wipes out a tank, and Sparky is able to push further forward. Now on the left, I'm still trying to get more terrain. I'm getting a couple of 50 cal recon gyms, making sure that I can keep an eye on this ridge line over here. But unfortunately, these things are not too survivable, so I hope to hide them, but I really haven't been paying too much attention to them or micromanaging correctly. But they are spotting the Panzer Grenadier over here, which are then getting hit by a couple more of my M4A2s. Unfortunately, also here is a Tiger. And this Tiger E is taking absolutely no shit from my M4s. Yes, it's taking some damage, but most of these are bounces. Whereas, if that thing fires back at me, I lose my transmission. If it fires again, I lose my tracks. And this just keeps happening. An M4 against a Tiger, which is just sitting out there, is not a good trade. As you can see, I just lost another one. And bullheadedly I just keep pushing forward, and another one gets killed off. So that was a display of how not to use your M4s. Staying power, not a good item of this deck. And you can see I am in the end of phase B, approaching phase C, and this is just something that this deck does not really have the materials to handle. Rip does. He's pushing forward with a lot of T-35 or T-34 85s over here. And I also have a little surprise standing by in case that Tiger does make an appearance over here. Rocket pod strike, pretty blind. I'm not sure if I actually hit that thing, but I'm thinking that I might have stunned it a little bit. And you can see that it is coming up. The Voltigeur, again, no anti-tank weapon. The bazookas do. The bazookas are ready to push forward. Let's see if we can get a nice close-up shot of these bazookas taking out the Tiger. They're lining up a shot. And there you go. They hit the Tiger and immediately wipe it out. One shot. These bazookas are incredibly good if you have them in cover. If you try to move them across an open field, of course they're dead pretty much instantly, but in an operation like this, close quarters, tank runs into a position where it really shouldn't be, well, the tank is not going to have a good time. Overall, my kill-death ratio in this map was not good. I think I broke even, we're going to see that in a couple seconds. But my overall aim was not really to get a good kill-death ratio or anything like that. It was to capture as much territory as possible, as quickly as possible, to make sure that my allies can then take it over from me and just hold the line. And I'd say over here it worked, because we were able to hold this town, which is definitely an important element on this map. And from this town you can then push to this hill, which we did by surrounding it with tanks. The hill's secure, and from the hill you can then, well, pretty much frog leap your way to, or leapfrog your way to this town down here. And you can just use these stepping stones and make your way forward. So, as you're going to see, 1795 in kills, 1680 in losses. Partially, of course, due to some just stupid decision making. You don't send M4s one after the other against a Tiger, which is just sitting there and is just taking out your tanks one by one. I never should have done that. Aside from that, the deck performed pretty much as expected. And I got some really interesting kills over here. Like this 30-point tank taking out a 45-point tank. But also some of those scout cars or the 75mm versions of them. Another M5A1 took out a Panzer IV-J. AMX or AMM8. I'm not sure why I keep calling them AMX, but AMM8 took out a Stuk 3. And another one of those Puma scout cars. AM M8. Took out a Panzer III, a Gepard, a Pioneer. I think this might have been the one that was able to push so far into that town. You can get a lot of use out of these things, especially early on, when the enemy does not have a lot of heavy armor. If I would have been facing King Tigers, Panthers, stuff like that, the battle would have been completely different. But that's why I was pushing everything forward in Phase A, trying to get as much terrain as possible, trying to get the terrain so that my allies can then relieve me and push further, and basically hoping that I get so much terrain in Phase A and B that I don't even make it to Phase C. Well, those are all elements that you need in this deck. Will this work in multiplayer? No idea. I have yet to try it, but I was definitely having a lot of fun this match with this game, and that for me is progress, because overall I haven't been enjoying Steel Division that much yet. Anyway, that's it for today. Let me know what your thoughts are down below in the comments. If you want the deck code, you can find it down below in the description. And if you have a good multiplayer replay of the deck, or of this deck being used, then by all means send it in. Links down below in the description. If you have your own replay, not so much of this deck or of any of your own, just let me know down below. There's a link, sending in your own replays. I'm always looking to learn more about the game, figure out what sort of plays you guys are making, and how we can all share that between the community. So if you have anything you need me to show off on the screen, let me know down below in the replay link, or the, Jesus. The link to sending in replays is down below in the description. Thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed the video, and I shall see you soon for more.